There is a rift in Dead by Daylight. No, not that rift. Instead, a rift separating the community, a continuing source of hatred, anger, and paranoia. This fire has been burning strong for about 8 years now, and while it's not as white hot as it once was, these 3 words still trigger countless heated debates to this day. While the fuel for the fire was already present, there was one perk that lit the fire of hatred. And what are those 3 words? Survive with friends. Back in the day, there used to be an extra option in DBD's main menu. Next to the option to play as Survivor, there was an option called Survive with Friends, which literally just gave you the option of inviting friends to your party so you can survive, well, with friends. While the menu option itself is gone now and has been merged into the regular Play as Survivor button, what it stands for is still very much present in DBD, inviting your friends to your lobby, hopping in a voice chat, and playing with comms. Now, if you're not a long-time DBD player, I know what you're thinking. Only Dead by Daylight players could get angry at people for playing video games with their friends. But back in the early days of DBD, information, or an intentional lack thereof, was no laughing matter. Just like today's sponsor, War Thunder. Over 2,500 vehicles await your command in War Thunder, including tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships from the 1920s to modern day from 10 major nations. With accurate audio, realistic graphics, and detailed breakdowns of what damage was dealt to your vehicles, War Thunder has immersion at its heart. With multiple different game modes, each with varying degrees of realism, you can find the playstyle that suits you. Available for free on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation, join the 70 million players now. New players and those returning from a 6-month break who sign up using my link in the description get a huge bonus of premium vehicles, exclusive decor, 100,000 silver lions, a week of premium accounts, and much more. Yes, of course the game's balance was different. There were less killers, less maps, etc, but you might notice something else was different too. Let's see if you can spot it. Here's the modern day version of Autohaven that you're all familiar with. Now, take a look at how it used to look. Notice any differences? Well, aside from the old version having leagues more identity than its modern day counterpart, you may notice that the HUD is completely different. There's an icon determining each survivor's current health state, a gen counter, and that's pretty much it. The information you got was fairly minimal. There were no hook counters, no status indicators showing which teammate is doing what, simply gens remaining and health states. Information for survivors was scarce, and that was by design. Of course, there were perks to help provide yourself or teammates with more information. For example, Kindred, which would reveal the auras of all teammates to everyone on your team and the killer if he was near whenever you were hooked, or Bond, which let you see the auras of your teammates within a certain range. And while they did provide good information, they came at the hefty cost of an entire perk slot, and the information would only be for yourself, like Bond, or for everyone else in specific scenarios, like Kindred. If more players wanted to gain access to this additional information, they too would have to sacrifice one of their perk slots to equip it. It was simply balance 101. The positive is the information you gain. The cost is 25% of your perk slots, meaning that's one less other perk you could have, and things were pretty fair that way. Well, at least in solo queue, that is. If we bring Survive with Friends into the picture, things change drastically. This seesaw of balance between value and cost skews heavily in favor of value. If one person were to get value from any aura perk, they could simply speak in the voice call and relay that information to everyone else in the team, despite them not sacrificing a perk slot to gain said information. Whether it be something smaller like somebody with Bond saying to their injured buddy, "Hey, wait there, I'm just around the corner, I'll heal you up," to something a bit more impactful like perhaps somebody with Alert telling the entire team exactly where the killer is when he breaks a pallet. While the information itself is hardly overpowered, it is designed to come with a cost, that being 25% of your perk slots. If all 4 survivors wanted to know this information, they would have to dedicate a perk to it, and it would still cost 25% of the overall team's build. But when it comes to Survive with Friends, one player could sacrifice a single perk slot and provide that information to the entire team, which would reduce the cost from 25% of the overall team's build to just a measly 6.25%, while still giving that information to everyone. The ability for Survive with Friends players to share their information perks over comms was obviously not part of the perk's intended design, but most of the time the information provided was more in the realm of quality of life, like Bond. So while killers did find it kind of dirty, it was hardly game breaking, so it wasn't the end of the world. But while at this point in time information perks were sitting on the back burner of Survive with Friends issues, there were some more pressing matters people were focused on. Bully squads. I've already made a video on that, link in the description below. But only 4 months after the game's release, on the 18th of October 2016, something new was about to steal the spotlight. The Halloween chapter, featuring Michael Myers and Laurie Strode alongside her perks Decisive Strike, Sole Survivor, and Objective Obsession. While most players already know about the horrors of Decisive Strike and the absolute chaos that single perk threw the game into for literal years, Laurie Strode's rampage was far from over, as Objective Obsession would also become one of the most abused and exploited perks in DBD's history. You see, Decisive Strike's reign of terror was even more widely known due to the fact that you'd often see lobbies with all 4 survivors using it, and that it was just as powerful in solo queue as it was in pre-made, whereas with Objective Obsession, you would typically only ever see 1 in a lobby at a time, which allowed it to slide under the radar a little bit better. So what exactly did Objective Obsession do? Objective Obsession. If you're looking in the killer's direction whilst outside of their terror radius, you can see the killer's aura and the killer can see your aura, up to a maximum distance of 64 meters or 72 meters if you're the obsession. Now, it's also worth clarifying that it specifically says if you're looking in the killer's direction and not if you're both looking in each other's direction. What this meant is that the survivor could just sweep their camera around until the killer's aura becomes visible, and then they could just lock on and, rather ironically, stalk the killer indefinitely, even when the killer's back is turned. The second the killer faces your direction, you can just flip your camera away and he can no longer see you anymore. So while yes, both players could see each other's aura, in reality what happened was the survivor could see the killer's aura anytime they wanted and would simply disable the perk whenever the killer wanted to look back, effectively eliminating any risk this perk would have to it. Speaking of eliminating risks, that leads us on to Laurie Strode's third perk, Sole Survivor, which apparently had multiple balance changes that the devs just forgot to document in patch notes, so we'll just go back to the earliest documented version. Sole Survivor reduces the range at which the killer can read auras depending on how many of your teammates are dead, by 50% with 1 dead teammate, 75% with 2 dead teammates, and completely disables the killer's ability to read auras with 3 dead teammates, which synergizes absolutely perfectly with Objective Obsession, which would completely negate the downside a lot of the time even with 1 single stack. But I'd be lying if I said it was common to see people using this. Why sacrifice a perk slot when you can simply look away when the killer faces you? On its own in regular gameplay, Objective Obsession was a strong aura perk, possibly the strongest aura perk in the entire game at that point in time. Was it too strong? Maybe. It offered some of the best information all game long with no cooldown, and while it was designed to come with the risk of revealing yourself, it was exceptionally easy to work around that downside, effectively eliminating it altogether by simply moving your mouse. Does that make it OP? You'll have to decide in the comments. But all of that is in solo queue. What happens if we bring Survive with Friends and voice chat into the equation? The second the game starts, you might hear, "It's Michael Myers." Just like that, literally 1 second into the match, and he's already lost his chance of getting a gen grab in tier 1. He's at the shack, he's going to the main building, you get the point. 1 single player equipping this perk gives the entire team permanent, uninterrupted knowledge of where the killer is at all times, as the person with Objective Obsession can simply relay the killer's location to the rest of the team, allowing teammates to start every chase prepared and in an optimal spot, or pushing for optimal gen pressure since they know the killer isn't nearby, and even completely eliminating stealth killers as a whole, as there was no undetectable at the time, so even tier 1 Myers was visible. It even made chases easier for the entire team to an extent, as if the killer was chasing somebody and decided to try a mind game or a counter rotation, the person with Object can simply say he's walking backwards and warn the teammates ahead of time. You could even see the trapper placing his traps, so that's another killer rendered unplayable by just this 1 perk. And of course, let's not forget the bully squads. Survive with Friends groups who would go out of their way to abuse the unfair state of the game back in the day in order to bully, harass, troll, and generally annoy killer players by using perks or mechanics that were too strong, unfair, or completely uncounterable, including but not limited to abusing infinite loops where it's physically impossible for the killer to ever catch you, exploiting bugs that allowed survivors to trap the killer indefinitely, abusing the old versions of decisive strike, borrowed time, sprint burst, etc. to get extra lives, extra health states, and multiple sprint bursts even while sprinting, and the infamous insta-blinds, which was so absurd that even DBD's game director himself got trolled and harassed so badly by them that they were removed almost immediately after. And Objective Obsession was another tool in their arsenal. Aside from using all the raw value previously discussed to further empower their usual antics, bully squads would also use it for, get this, teabagging the killer across the map too. It's so petty that it's funny. No matter which game you play, a team with voice chat is going to perform better than an equally skilled team without it. Even in a game like Overwatch, you can immediately notice the difference between a team on voice chat and a team without it, as the team with voice chat would typically all beam down the same target at the same time, absolutely obliterating them, whereas a team without comms typically wouldn't do that unless the target is severely out of position. Of course, the ability to ping enemies helps close this gap, but doesn't eliminate it entirely. And that being said, yes, there will always be a gap between Survivor Friends and solo queue, but Objective Obsession pushed this to the extreme, making the difference go from a gap to a canyon. Things needed to change. So, 4 years and 7 months after the initial release of Objective Obsession, on the 4th of May 2021, in patch 4.7.0, the devs brought us a rework to the once controversial Objective Obsession. Rework. Active effect. If you are the Obsession, your aura is revealed to the killer for 3 seconds every 30 seconds. Passive effect. Whenever the killer reads your aura, you can read theirs too. Which is honestly an absolutely amazing rework for multiple reasons. First and foremost, it still keeps the perk's identity as the perk for seeing the killer's aura, but addresses the 2 pain points of the original iteration. The information is no longer unlimited and limitless, but still potent, and the risk factor is no longer removed entirely by simply moving your camera. Plus, it serves as a counter to literally every aura reading perk or add-on, as let's say the killer had barbecue and chili and they hook someone and see your aura, well, because of the new passive effect, you can see their aura too. Of course, the information provided by the perk can still be relayed to the rest of the team over voice chat, but since there's a 30-second interval between each chunk of information, it does at least give the killer some breathing room to get things done without being baited out to the entire team immediately. But let's circle back to the elephant in the room. 4.5 years for a single change? How on earth did it take that long? Well, quite frankly, that is ridiculous, and there isn't really much defending it. Yes, they did have bigger fish to fry, like fixing exhaustion, recovering while sprinting, old decisive strike, old borrowed time, infinite loops, etc, etc, but even decisive strike's initial rework into an anti-tunnel perk was 2 entire years before this. Just a reminder that War Thunder is available for free on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. Install now using the link in the description for multiple bonuses for new players and players returning from a 6-month break alike. Objective Obsession is still a great perk to this day, and there's no denying that the modern day version is much fairer than the old version. Not to mention that with the addition of the undetectable status effect, it no longer erases stealth killers from the game altogether. If they wanted to close the gap between solo queue and Survivor Friends even further, they could make this perk reveal the killer's aura to the entire team, but that does sound rather OP at first thought. While Objective Obsession was never the sole reason for the hatred of Survivor Friends groups, it was the one perk that could be used to easily identify when a team was Survivor Friends. If a team was acting suspicious and then the killer saw that object aura for a split second, they'd instantly know that it was indeed a Survivor Friends group.